Thank you for joining us at the Fire Mountain Gems Jewelry Design Studio. I'm Kat, and I'm the author of New Connections in Chainmail Jewelry, and today we're going to work on the Crosscut Bracelet, which is from my book. Let's get started. This project is based on the Japanese 12-in-2 weave, so from the Japanese family of weaves. And what's going on here is that we have glass rings, which take the place of the typical connectors you would see in a Japanese weave. And we create long strands of the glass chain with the jump rings and beads, and then we go ahead and join those two strands together in the very center. This one takes a little bit to go ahead and complete, and there's a few things going on here, but we're going to make it happen. Pick up one glass ring and have your beads ready, 2 of these, another glass ring, and every time we're basically going to make sure there's 2 glass beads in between each glass ring on one side of the jump ring. On the second side of the jump ring, add 1 more bead and close the jump ring. What we have are 2 seed beads in between the glass rings on one side of the jump ring, and then we have 1 seed bead on the other side of the glass rings. And you're going to want to make sure that as you continue your long length, that you make sure you have single beads all on one side and the doubled beads all on the other side, in between the glass rings. Let's go ahead and put the second jump ring in. Grab the last glass ring. At this point, it doesn't matter which side you're on. And look at what you have, and go ahead and put 2 on the same side of the jump ring that the previous 2 beads are on. 2, and right, we need a glass ring because there's always 2 beads in between the glass ring. And then we switch sides to put a bead on the other side of the jump ring. And now we can close it. And we'll take a look at it. So you can see that we have the 2 sets of beads on the one side of the weave again, and then if we just slightly turn this, kind of flip it over, you'll notice the single beads are on the other side of the weave. So we're going to just keep going and create our length that way. So you've completed your desired length. Make it exactly the length that you want and save just a tiny bit of room, maybe just slightly less than a ½ inch for your slide clasp. And you'll notice that all the single beads are on the one side of the weave and all the doubled beads are on the opposite side. And guess what? You have to do it again. We need 1 more strip, the same exact thing, and then we can go ahead and start connecting it. What we've done now is create 2 identical strands, and I've placed them in such a way that all of the single beads are on the inside of the bracelet of both rows. So we have the doubled beads on the outside, the very outsides of the bracelet. And that's because we're going to end up connecting, if I bring these closer to each other, we're going to end up connecting the 2 strands together and then also just slightly offset it so that we're making little tiny connections to the jump rings, basically in a crossways pattern, back and forth, hence the crosscut bracelet. And in order to start making the connections, it's easiest if you put your clasp on now. So we're going to prep the clasp and put it on now so that the 2 strands are very close together and held next to each other, so that as you continue to go down the 2 strips everything's not moving around on you as much. So let's go ahead and prep the clasp. To prep the clasp, put 2 tiny jump rings on each loop. Okay, we're about ready to get the clasp put on. We've got 8 total jump rings added to the loops of the clasp, 2 per loop. And now we can go ahead and attach this to the 2 strands that we have. So first, again, check how they're laid out. You want the single beads to be towards the inside center of the bracelet and the doubled beads to the outside. And to get started, we're going to use a medium jump ring, medium size, and we're going to simply go through the glass ring on the side that's furthest away from me, and then go through 2 of the loops of the slide clasp. So I already know that this is the outside of my bracelet here, which is why I chose these outer 2 loops, this outer loop to go through. And I'm not going to make the same exact connection with the second strand. Why? Because it needs to be slightly offset. And to make it slightly offset, but still have room to reach the clasp, I need to do something a little bit unique here. I'm going to open up the last jump ring on that strand. Take off the glass ring, just the glass ring. And with that open jump ring, I'm going to continue to bring this back towards the clasp and go through the 2 hanging rings. And again, I'm making sure that my beads are in the right configuration. I have the doubled beads on the outside of the bracelet. And watch and see what happens here. Once I lay this back down, I'll be able to see how I got it slightly offset, which is what I wanted. Do you see how one is angled further down than the other? Now we're ready to make the connection. The first connection is going to be basically connecting the 2 rings that are closest to the clasp together. We need it to be fairly tight right here so that we can keep going down. So we don't want these loose. We're going to need to connect that smaller medium jump ring and the large jump ring together with a pair of tiny jump rings. Let's do that. And you avoid the bead. So you do push the bead back towards the length of the bracelet. You don't want the bead caught in the middle here. Not yet. So I've connected the 2 rings closest to the clasp with a single tiny ring, and then I'm going to double it so that I have a pair. We're going to go ahead and double that. Go right through both. Oh, there we go. And we've completed the first connection. Now the trick from here on out is trapping a bead. So we do want the beads to be trapped, just the center beads trapped in between every pair of small jump rings that we add. And what I mean by that is each of these single beads in both rows are going to be trapped in between pairs of tiny jump rings. So the first connection is going to trap the first bead I see, and how to trap it is by connecting these two jump rings. So the ones that make that slight slant, that's where I'm making my first connection with two of the tiny jump rings. Let's do that. Here and here, grabbing both, close it quickly because it's a little guy and this wants to slide off. Rinse and repeat. Here you can pick up the whole thing now that it's connected. Go ahead and double it. And now we've connected a couple sets of jump rings here, and we've trapped the bead. You see the bead really has very little room to move. It's not going to go anywhere. Now, you will keep going, continuing to add the pairs of tiny jump rings, but each time you trap a bead, it will be one from one row, one from the row underneath. Then you just keep going up and down, making sure you trap a bead from each row as you go. So the next bead to be trapped is this one. And where would you make that connection to be able to trap that? Well, I have to bring this a little closer, and I can see that the easiest way to trap that bead right in the center is by connecting these two right here. And then what would be next? Since I'll have jump rings right here, and I know I need to go down to the first row, and I want to trap the first row bead, I'm going to need to make a new connection here, and then here, and then here, and you just keep going. So let's do that. We've completed the desired length and attached both of the strands all the way as far as we can go, right at the very end there. And now we need to count our glass rings to make sure we have the right amount so that when we add the clasp, it's offset in the way that we like it. And you're basically doing a mirror image of what you've done on this side when you're right at the clasp. So we have 5, 10, 14 glass rings on this side because we took one glass ring off at the very beginning here. And then we have 15 glass rings on the opposite side, and we're going to end up taking one off when we put the clasp on, and then we'll end up with 14 glass rings from each strand on each side of the bracelet. So to put the clasp on, you're going to take that medium jump ring and go through the glass ring on the row that's closest to you, which is actually also the shorter row at this point, the shorter row. And then you're going to very carefully, without twisting the bracelet, bring it up towards that clasp ring and carefully slide on the 2 hanging tiny jump rings. And then we can close that. And now to make it a little easier so I can see, and I've already connected the one side of the slide, I can go ahead and unslide the clasp. I don't want to unslide the clasp before I put this on there, or else it may be turned when I try and connect it together. So you can see here that if I connected directly to this glass ring, it would actually make the bracelet a little bit jumbled. There's too much going on right here, which is why we're going to remove just the glass ring and open up that jump ring to connect directly to the tiny clasp rings. Find our closure. There it is. Slide off the glass ring, bring the clasp up, make sure it's straight to the bracelet and not twisted, and slide on the tiny jump rings. So it's a little tight here in terms of room, a little tight, but you have room to close it. Adjust, close, and you'll notice something as soon as we close this and lay it out again. What do we notice? Well, we're noticing that right here we haven't made a connection yet, right? We haven't basically tied up the loose ends. We have a clasp ring here that's connected to nothing in the weave. So we need to copy what was done at the very beginning, which is just make a simple connection between the very last clasp ring and the very last jump ring, trapping a bead. So we're going to go ahead and pick this entire thing up, and in order to trap that bead, I pull that loose one over, that loose bead, and I'm going to connect these two final jump rings closest to the clasp rings that I've already added. Connect those with two new tiny jump rings. Pick the whole thing up, then I can see where the connection is. Connect the two, doubling what I just did, what I just closed. And there you have it. You have the crosscut bracelet, and you can see why it's crosscut. And you have the clasp offset, so you have the two on this side, the two last jump rings angling this way, these angling this way, but they're actually mirror images of each other. And you're done. I hope you all enjoyed making the crosscut bracelet. Whether you wear it, sell it, or gift it, you can definitely check out more of my videos and other color options at firemountaingems.com.